Hello, everyone, and welcome. And pause our music. I love that music. Welcome to this episode of PEPTalk, Productive Environment Podcast. I'm Andrea Anderson in Carolina Beach, North Carolina.
And I'm Barbara Hemphill in Raleigh, North Carolina.
And we are happy that you are joining us today for this pep talk. And as you can see on the screen, we are going to talk about the art of wastebasketry. How to let go of what you don't need to make room for what you want. And I have this, I'm going to take this off the screen so we can come on and just chat with you guys for a few minutes. Barbara, it's so interesting that this topic has come up in multiple ways with us over the last couple of days, really. And it's something that is really core to our program and what we teach people about clutter and organization. But we've been talking about it kind of in the theme of gardening. So I don't have a green thumb, but I when we were growing up in Ohio, we used to have to pick weeds out of the garden. You are a green thumb. Those are beautiful. Those are gorgeous. So you, on the other hand, are a green thumb. But I do know what weeds are. And I know the difference between a weed and the flower or the plant, right? So we've it's come up for us in the terms of, pulling weeds, pruning shrubs to make room for new growth, right? So we've talked about it in that respect. And in the decluttering process, it's not quite as easy as that. I think with the, like I said, you can look at weeds and know which ones to pull, or you can look at shrubs and know which ones to cut. But when it comes to paper, information, and even email, I think when you actually created the term and there's a series of questions that go along with this. I don't even know when you invented that or came up with that, but it was brilliant. I don't even know if email existed yet, but it actually applies to that as well. So anyway, my question is, how did you come up with the art of wastebasketry questions, which we will share with the group today? But to help people decide, and that's one of the biggest questions we get is, how do I know what to keep and what I can get rid of? So,
well, I have to say that this topic, when you think about it, the art of wastebasketry is about identifying what is clutter. So everything that I've done for 4 decades has been based on clutter is postponed decisions. And the issue is, how do you decide what to keep? I want to jump back to something you said, and I want to challenge you a little bit. You talked about it was easy to identify the weeds. Well, I have to tell you something that just happened in my personal life. So I had somebody who was helping me with my gardening kinds of things. I'm not a gardener, by the way. Those roses, a company does that, not me. I don't have a green thumb. But somebody called and said he was looking for work. And I said, well, my garden needs weeding. So, if you're willing to do that, you said, oh, sure, I'll come. And he came. And so I kind of walked around the yard and said, okay, here's this, this, and this. And he was there for like half a day. And the next day, my husband and I went out and he said, he didn't get all the weeds. And I said, oh, I didn't know those were weeds. Because sometimes, when there's a lot of acreage here, and sometimes I cannot tell the difference between the weeds and what is meant to be there. So I think that actually is kind of the core of the problem, is how does someone identify in their own life what is a weed? And, we talk about it in terms of paper. And the reason we do is because in my experience and the experience of all the certified productive environment specialists we work with, paper is the most difficult because it's the most complicated. It's not the paper itself, but it's what it represents, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your intentions, all that sort of thing. But I want to, we'll talk about paper today, because if you will do the paper, everything else will get easier. it's just a fact. I mean, I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. It's what everybody waits until the last minute to do. Like companies that help people downsize, most of them don't deal with paper because they don't know how to help their clients decide, or they don't have the time to do it. They're not paid to do that amount of time. On the other hand, I also want to say that the art of wastebasketry applies at a much higher level. And that's the art of wastebasketry in terms of what should I not be doing? And that, to-do lists. And today, the opportunities of things that we have to feel we have to do and that we can do are so huge. How many times, Andrea, have we had a client come on and we'll say, the problem is I have too many interests. I like to do too many things. Probably 8 out of 10 people say that, right? Because we're exposed to so many, many things. And so I have to say that in my own life, dealing with the art of wastebasketry has required some pretty dramatic changes and some that were not easy to do. And the reason that we are successful with our clients is because we emphasize so much about accountability and together we are better. People can't go in and look at file cabinets full of files or boxes full of files and sit down and do it themselves. I mean, very few people could. If they could, they wouldn't have the boxes in the first place. I mean, the reason they have the boxes and the files is that they didn't know how to decide what was a weed.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that part, because I was like, oh, it's easy to tell what a weed is, but apparently it's not.
Well, it's funny. That just happened on Monday of this week.
I know. We didn't discuss this. That's great. But it's true. And a lot of times it's just, again, we've talked about this before, that people just kind of feel paralyzed with their stuff and they don't know where to start. And then when they do start, I don't know, what if I need this in the future? Yeah.
And I just realized I didn't really answer your question. You said, how did this develop? To be honest, I would have to go back and do some real research to even figure out. I know it was an ongoing process. Okay. So it was like, I feel very strongly that it is not our job or our right to tell someone else what they should or shouldn't keep. We felt in fact, a number of years ago, I spent thousands of dollars going to franchise, and I stopped it because franchise is about cookie cutter. This is what you should do. It's the antithesis of what we are. We're about, what works for you. Having said that, we have found over and over that one of the things we can say and do say is, if this were mine, this is what I would do. And I cannot tell you the probably hundreds of times somebody would say, oh, thank you for giving me permission. It was like, It was what I wanted to do, but I just couldn't do it. But if they look at you as the expert and it's something you're willing to do. So that those questions evolved over time as I was working with clients and figuring out what stopped them. What were the things that they didn't know about? And so I was like, okay, you can't change what you don't measure. So ever since I created the company, it was about being able to measure change, and you can't measure it if you don't have some guidelines. So that's kind of how the art of basketry developed.
So Kathy posted something. I have to share this because this kind of backs up what you just said. Kathy Music is one of our certified productive environment specialists. A weed is defined as a plant considered undesirable in a particular situation. In other words, it is a completely individual decision. So it's the same thing with our paper, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have a right. I mean, that's why we say organizing is an art. I mean, it really is an art. And two people, the example I've used in companies many, many times is that the last of the questions, which is my favorite, which is what's the worst thing that would happen if you got rid of it?
Go through those together. Yeah.
What's the worst thing that would happen without it? and two employees can answer the same thing. The worst thing is if I threw it away or I deleted it and my boss wanted it, he or she would yell at me. And one would say, he'll get over it, throw it away. And the other one will say, I don't want him to yell, keep it. That's the art. But here's the important part. We call it Hemphill's principle. If you don't know you have it or you can't find it, it is of no value. So yes, you can keep it for sure. But if you can't find it or you don't remember you have it, then there wasn't really any point in keeping it. And then it really is clutter.
Right. Exactly. I love it. So one of the things that we do first, we've talked about this on this podcast, and anybody that's in our community knows our three initial decisions that you make about paper or anything is, do I need to file this for future reference? Do I need to act on this, or can I toss it? And that's where the stumbling block comes in. Sometimes it's like, I don't know. So you came up with these questions, and so we want to talk about those. The first one is it kind of goes back to the file, act, toss system, is, does this item require action? So does it require action?
And it's action, and it's an action that you can identify, not just an action like, well, I might want it someday. That doesn't count. It has to be, this is a bill I need to pay. This is a form I need to fill out. This is a phone call I need to make. This is a project I'm working on. That I need to do something with that now or within a frame of time that you identify. You might say, for me, I have my action files is 1 year. There's 36 of them. And those 36 files are the projects that at the beginning of this year, I said I thought I was interested in and that I was really going to follow through on. I can guarantee you at the end of the year, I'll go back and some of those I will not have tossed. We'll not have done any action on them.
Okay.
But then I can say, okay, is it time to make it a higher priority? Or is it like, it's not really, I have a whole lot more ideas than anybody can ever implement, which is the true of probably everybody that listens to us, because everybody that listens to us thinks the myth is, if I just got organized, I'd be able to do everything, keep everything, have everything. And that is a lie.
Amen. Okay. So the next question on the art of wastebasketry question. So does this item require action was the first one. Number two is, can I identify a specific use for it?
So then you can say, I'm thinking of writing a book someday. I'm not ready to write it yet, but I think I want to, and this would be a good idea. If you're not actively working on it right now, it's a reference file. So it's going to go in a reference file called book ideas. And one of the things we teach is, okay, so most people, when they do what they call filing systems and what we call finding systems, they make it they narrow it down in too many things. So they have 10 file folders related to book, but they can't find any because it's not really indexed properly. And so it's like book ideas. If you have two different books, then you might have a file for each of the different books, but otherwise you don't even know what the name is. I just want to write a book, but I don't even know what it's about yet. You could have a reference file called book ideas. So that's a specific use, but it isn't an action file because you're not currently doing it.
Perfect. Good. All right. And number three, so if you've answered no to the first two and you're still not sure whether you should keep it or not, the third one is it difficult to obtain again?
Yes. And that's such an important question. And the interesting thing, in the 4 decades I've been in business, the answer to that has changed dramatically, because I used to keep voluminous amounts of files from my clients, things that I did for my clients that I would want to go back and look on. But now information changes so quickly, for one thing. Well, that's not we'll get to that one. Information is so easily obtainable. There's very few things that you cannot find again someplace, because we just have things available because of technology. We have things, but I can give you a perfect example. I had a client one time who used to speak on cruise ships, And I went to her office, and she had these travel bags. The office, you could barely walk around because it was full of all these travel bags full of every trip that she'd ever taken. And we went to look through it, and it was like the only thing that she couldn't get again were her diaries that were her personal diaries that she'd written. So she ended up keeping just one brochure that told what the trip was, the itinerary for the trip, and the diaries itself. So she went from bags this big to one file with the journal and everything in it. It was very easy when you thought about it that way.
Wow, love it. All right, and then number 4. Well, first of all, Carrie Thomas is also one of our certified productive environment specialists. She said that was her favorite question, which was, is it difficult to obtain again? Hey, Carrie. And then the next one is it recent enough to be useful?
And that's one that has, again, changed very quickly. I used to use the example of, I used to be with AAA. If you were going to plan a big trip, in fact, this is one of the things that was in those travel bags. With AAA, they would send you this big, huge packet of all the maps and the brochures and all of those things. And I would go to clients' houses, and they would have those that were like 20 years old. And so if you use information that's outdated, so if you did your planning on a brochure that was produced 20 years ago, you might be, make a mistake or waste a lot of time if you have a map that's not up to date. Or if you're in industry, because I've had clients that were in where there are OSHA regulations and things like that. Well, if you plan something on a regulation that's no longer in the rule, then that's not going to make any difference. And now, because of the ability to search on the internet, you can find out quickly whether something's recent. Now, you have to be careful, of course, because you don't always know it's true. You have to quantify it. But definitely, we don't have to keep nearly as much stuff as we used to because it's outdated. In fact, I just saw an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning that said now people, because of AI and how it's impacting the world, that businesses are beginning, the days of planning 5 years in advance is gone. It's absolutely gone because you have no clue. Now it's more like 3 months that you're beginning to look, because in 3 months things could be very different because of AI.
So true. All right. And here's an important one. So if you've answered no to all the other questions, does this item require action? No. Can I identify a specific use for it? Probably not. Is it difficult to obtain again? No, I could download it off the internet. I could find it. Is it recent enough to be useful? Maybe, maybe not. Are there tax or legal implications? That's another one.
Well, that brings up the story which actually started this entire business. My first client was a 55-year-old widow of an attorney. And one of the things that the attorney had were boxes of, back in those days, we got canceled checks in the mail wrapped up in bank statements. And they were big, thick envelopes that people put in boxes, and you would find them under the bed and in the garage and in the closet and stuff like that. And everybody kept them because they had numbers on them. So it's like, oh, if they have numbers, the IRS is going to want them. Well, so I would ask the question, and this is one of the things that evolved because I didn't really know the answer to it. But the way I went at it was, okay, what is the purpose of a bank statement? It's to balance your checkbook. 95% of my clients never balance their checkbook. The bank statement itself didn't say anything. And so in those days, we literally would take out the canceled checks that represented tax deductions or capital gain. So if they put a new roof on the house and they wrote a check for it, or if they bought a mattress and it had a 10-year warranty or something like that. So we would literally take out just the canceled checks. Of course, we don't have to do that anymore because we can do it electronically. But the question people ask all the time was about, what does the IRS need and all that. One of the things I can tell you from experience is if you ask 3 attorneys or 3 accountants, you'll probably get 3 different answers at least. The most important thing is that you have a system you implement. Now, the first book that I wrote, Taming the Paper Tiger, came out of that question. How long do you keep? Because I went to the library figuring there must be a book in the library that would tell you how long to keep things. I went to the library and there wasn't one. And I thought, this is truly amazing, because it doesn't make any difference if you earn $800,000 a year or $18,000 a year. These are the questions you need to know the answer to. How long to keep insurance policies and tax records and real estate records. And so I set out to write it. I did research on how long. And so Taming the Paper Tiger listed every single piece of paper that came into the house. I mean, junk mail, artwork, memorabilia, photographs. It didn't say this is how long you should keep it. It did give IRS records, such as if you're in business, it's 7 years plus the current record. If it's personal, it's 3 years. So there's some general guidelines. But what it did was it asked questions about why you were keeping it and how you were going to find it. That book today still exists, but it's called Organizing Paper at Home, What to Toss and How to Find the Rest. It's available on Amazon, and it's got an index in it. It literally says, what should you keep in your safe deposit box? And it gives you a list of the things that should go in safe deposit box. It talks about, it gives you the questions that you can answer in order to know how long you need to keep it. And then if you have a system, if you've listened to us, you know that we love the word system, and we use the acronym Saving You Space, Time, Energy, and Money. So if you have a system, then if you are audited, you will be in much better shape. And I've seen that happen with clients where they had a system and the IRS knows then that they're trying, and they're much more lenient.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Awesome. And the last question, you alluded to it earlier, is, all of the other questions can be discarded if you can answer this one. What is the worst thing that can happen without it?
Yeah, so you play that out. If I threw this away and I was wrong, what would I do? I'd have to buy it again. Okay, well, is that a price you're willing to pay? And that brings up another one of the principles that we teach all the time, which is the cost factor, which is you can keep everything you want if you are willing to pay the cost. And the cost is time, space, money, and energy. So through the years, I can remember one of my early clients had 4 boxes of paper that she had moved 4 times. And she said, what do I do with this? And I said, well, you only have one of 2 choices. You either go through it all or you toss it all. There isn't really anything in between those two. It's not like you can magically look at it and say, okay, there's 500 pieces of paper in this box, and here's the 4 that are important. You just can't do that.
That's right.
So what I would say to them then was, there's a way to measure whether you're willing to pay the price to keep it. Like if you just tossed it away. I remember Stephanie Winston was the person really who prompted me to write this book, to launch this business, because she had written Getting Organized. And one of her recommendations for a closet was to clean out your closet and then put it in your neighbor's garage for a month or 6 months or something. And then if you didn't want it back, then you could get rid of it. So that was kind of where I got this idea. So you can say, okay, here's these 4 boxes. So take 1 hour and take one of the boxes, and you have to stick to that box. You can't take one out of this box and one out of this box, one out of this box. You have to stick with that box for 1 hour. And then at the end of the hour, measure the results. Like, how much did I really keep? And if I had thrown all this away, would it have been devastating to me? Or is it something that if I didn't know I have it, I would never have missed it anyway? One of my first clients, when I first started, I dealt with a couple of hoarders. Learned very quickly that was not where I wanted to go. But this woman was a brilliant woman. She was a computer programmer. She only had one arm. She had a hook on one arm. She raced cars. She built computers. She made quilts. She was an amazing person. But her house was, you couldn't even walk in it. I stopped counting the empty shopping bags when I got to 150. And one of the things for her was that she had inherited, she had not only her own clutter, but she had what I call circumstantial clutter, which her mother died and left her 100 dressers full of paper. They lived in a big plantation in Virginia, and the dressers were full of paper, everything from stock certificates to grocery lists and whatever. So she felt that she had to go through it because of the financial implication. She really had no idea what was there. And her daughter wanted nothing to do with it, which is one of the things that we're seeing now, is that so many people have enormous amounts of stuff, which their children don't and grandchildren don't want. And in many cases, when they pass on, it will just be dumped, which is why it's better for us to go through it now. But do that 1 hour and see what you get out of it. And then you say, okay, I've got 4 boxes. So how long is it going to take me to go through that? And again, that's not a moral issue. One person would say, yes, it's worth it. And another person would say, no, it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about the client that I recently went to that we spent a week with. And we talked about that on our last podcast, The Landfill or Your Life. So if you haven't heard that one, go listen to that one. But we did that. We realized it was going to take us too long because the very first box it took us a really long time because we were trying to remove the paper clips and the binder clips and all that. But I was thinking about the numbers. So we got through in that week 200 boxes. We actually processed 200 boxes. And Barbara, you're exactly right. The options for this client were throw it all away without looking at it or go through every single box. There was no in between. And for her, it was worth paying the price in time, space, money, because it was costing her energy. It was costing her life, basically. We talked about that on the last podcast. But I was thinking about the numbers. So we went through 200 and it condensed down to about 150 that were going away, that were tossed. And out of that 15, so 10%. Of those boxes that were going away, 15 were kept for further review. Just not sure yet. And maybe on that second review, there will be more things that will go. But just, and that was okay. That we didn't say, oh, you have to get rid of everything. So just having the permission, it ended up being about 10%, about 15 of those boxes. Now there were another 100 boxes that haven't been gone through yet in addition. So now we know that out of those, maybe 10 will be kept also. But anyway,
well, I had the same experience. Yeah. It isn't just individuals. Okay. So I had the same experience with a law firm, law firm that had been in existence for 46 years. They'd gone paperless several years ago, but hadn't done anything with all the paper prior. And there was an entire floor. It was a 2-floor office. And on the second floor were all the boxes that were through the years. And again, they had to go through them all in order to figure out. Now, here's the interesting thing. I talked to a client, or not a client. I talked to someone who was at a convention, and he said he had hired someone, paid him $40,000 to come in for 1 year to scan the documents. And he said they scanned it and they didn't begin to scratch the surface of what it was. Well, I know from experience, he wasn't willing to hear it, which is sad, but I know from experience that if the owner of the law firm and the employees of the law firm had gotten together, they could have identified, okay, what is the criteria for what we're keeping? Mm-hmm. And so we do something called the Productive Environment Day, which is an event where that's exactly what happens. And then when everybody's doing it together, I've said it so many times, my mother used to say, many hands make light work. Yeah. And so it didn't take a long time to identify what kinds of documents we were looking for. And so, you can. And the interesting thing is, and I've said this many times, if you have 1,000 paper documents and you need to find it, you literally can hire temps who know nothing about your business and give them criteria for what to look for. Dates and types of documents and keywords and stuff, because I've done it in Washington, D.C. I've done that many times with companies where they had stuff off site, they were sued or something, they had to bring it on, and we hired temporaries and the temporaries went through it. You can do that with paper documents. You can't do it with digital documents. Temporaries cannot find documents, which is why for the company that was hiring somebody to scan every document that came in there, if they didn't do something ahead of time, which I know from the conversation they did not, to make sure that those documents were labeled and stored correctly, they will be lost forever.
Interesting. Yeah. And the client I was talking about is an individual, but the paper she was dealing with was not individual. It was family business through 8 decades. But then it came down to her. So that's the other thing. Barbara, you and I have been talking about this. Like, when everybody that's watching this, think about what you have. Think about the paper and the things that you're going to leave behind for someone, whether you have children or not. There is someone that's going to be doing something with your things. And think about that. If you're listening to this, I mean, now's the time to take care of that and handle that. And so the buck got passed all the way down through decades to this one person who had this burden on her to go through it all. So
here's an important thing to insert in here, and your client did this. So one of the very, very important things we say is, before you start going through the old stuff, it is critical that you stop the problem. That means that you create a system that going forward, there isn't a problem. Because if you have the new stuff coming in and you're not paying attention to it, and one of the things I know from experience is that end of life, if you're doing estate planning and will planning and things like that, and if you own any property, the amount of paper records that are going to come in, I mean, you would think it's a paperless world. It is not. All the real estate deals that we got recently, we got tons of paper.
Yeah.
And the amount of paper that I've accumulated in the last 2 years as a result of our end of life planning is huge. And if I hadn't had a system to deal with it, I would have an even bigger mess. So it's really, really important that you stop the problem before you go back and deal with the old stuff.
Exactly. Beautiful. One more thing we're going to share with you guys. We have a document that you can download that you'll get access to. Eds, if you can remove that banner off the bottom, that way they can see the Art of Wastebasketry questions that we just went through are on here. So you can actually go complete our Productive Environment Scorecard at productiveenvironmentscore.com, and you will get this emailed to you so you can download it. And we are, not big on printing a lot of paper, but this is one paper that we definitely recommend that you print and put up somewhere near your space, in or near your office space, because all the questions are on here. We talked at the beginning about the File-Act toss system. This is a snapshot of really how you can transform your space.
Literally, one of the promises I tell people all the time is, if you look at this piece of paper, this system, there is no piece of paper anywhere in your life that doesn't fit here somewhere. And if you don't know how that works, then you should join us, because we will show you that this is a picture of the system you need to put in place that will handle every piece of paper that comes into your life. And once you've learned to do it with paper, you can transfer it over to digital.
That's right. That's right. And if you're watching this and you are a specialist or a coach or a consultant, and you love the idea of helping people do the things that we're talking about, then you can also go to becomeaspecialist.com. We are actively, looking for people who want to start their own business, or maybe they're already a coach and they want to add organizing and productivity to their business. So go check that out. And a couple of comments I want to post before we go. Kathy says, it's 100% true. Every piece of paper fits in this system somewhere. If it doesn't, then we want you to contact us.
Yes.
Reach out to us and let us know so we can,
That's a challenge I'll give to anybody. I want to know if you've got a piece of paper that doesn't fit in there. I want to hear from you.
We want to hear about it. Let us know. So, and then last but not least, I want to give a shout out to Cannery. He said, praise God, we made it to this Pep Talk live. It's a blessing for my family. My wife and I are watching this live talk, and they're watching from where, Barbara?
They are in India, and this is my passion project in India with the Shepherd's House Ministry. So it's such a blessing to have them on today. So.
Yes. Hi, guys. Awesome. All right. Well, that is all we have for you today. Ask yourself those questions. If you're stuck and you don't know where to start, just start somewhere. Just stand where you are or sit where you are right now and look around and pick up the first piece of paper and ask yourself those questions. And again, if you go to productiveenvironmentscore.com, you can download that document that has all the questions on there, and that will help you get started. So thanks for joining us. We want to hear your comments, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Happy paper taming.
Bye.